This is The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media. Now, here's Jason Jones.
Aloha, everybody, and welcome to The Jason Jones Show. I am your host, Jason Jones. My wife tells me these intros are a little too campy. She's wrong. And if you agree with her, you're both wrong. So today, guys, we're going to be talking about the most important organization in your neighborhood. And these organizations are in every neighborhood, and most people don't even know they exist. These organizations stand with the most vulnerable women and the most vulnerable children right in your neighborhood at the most vulnerable moments of their life. And now, with the COVID crisis and the shutdown, this presents opportunities and challenges for these organizations. And to help talk to us, about these organizations is Victoria Robinson. Victoria is a nonprofit specialist, gifted public speaker, passionate advocate for the vulnerable, television personality, radio, and podcast host. She has a show on HGTV with her daughter, My House is Your House. Her podcast reaches millions of people. And today we're going to talk to her about the most beautiful, special organization in your community and how you can stand with them as they serve the most vulnerable women in your communities in the most vulnerable moments of their life. And they stand with them. And then eventually these women become the pillars of your community. So let's get on with the interview. And this episode has been brought to you by Movie to Movement, promoting a culture of life, love, and beauty through the power of film. Go to movietomovement.com and check out our new movie, Divided Hearts of America, starring Benjamin Watson. It's going to be in theaters everywhere this year, if there are theaters this year. Movietomovement.com. This is The Jason Jones Show with Victoria Robinson. Here we go. Aloha, Victoria Robinson. Welcome to The Jason Jones Show.
Thank you for having me, Jason.
Well, first of all, aloha. Now, you're in Nashville, right?
I am in Nashville, Tennessee.
I love Nashville. I love the Grand Ole Opry. I love that Gaylord Opryland Hotel there. I don't know if that makes me a cheeseball tourist or not, but Nashville is one of my favorite places. And, you know, we just recently met, and I knew before we met I was not going to like you. I knew it because everyone I met told me how amazing Victoria Robinson is. Everyone. So then I said, you know what? I'm going to be the guy that doesn't like this person. But then I met you, and I was like, Victoria is amazing. And then I said, you know what? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I said, I'm blushing.
Yeah, no, I met you, and I immediately fell in love, and I thought, man, I was going to be the guy that didn't like her. Give me some dirt on you. Give me a reason not to like you. I mean, do you chomp your food? Do you talk in the movie theater? Like, are you one of those people, if I'm watching a movie, you're like, hey, what's going to happen next? Hey, I think this is going to give me some dirt.
People that said, okay, all right, here's my dirt about movies because you're a movie guy. And first of all, thank you for having me.
It's great to have you.
Second of all, that was so sweet for people to say that. That really blesses me, and that's really nice. But I guarantee you there's good dirt on me. But I will tell you this. I'm the person that doesn't say what's going to happen next, what's going to happen next. I'm the person who tells you, Jason, what's going to happen next.
Oh, no.
Because I can't
You're
watch
horrible.
A movie. I'm one of those people. I cannot watch a movie or a murder mystery. I just know, and it drives my family crazy. They said, I hate watching movies with you. I hate watching shows with you. I said, you've already seen it, and I haven't. I don't know what it is. I always read Nancy Drew books growing up. So it's that detective in me. I just figure things out. So there you go.
Well, you know what is amazing about that, what you just said, when you said you haven't seen the movie before you know it's going to happen, as a writer, as a screenwriter, you do know you've seen it before because it's the monomyth. These stories are all kind of the same, and the same things are supposed to happen on the same page at the same time. And it's always surprising to me because I am that way too. So I can't be a hypocrite. I can't hate you for that. I'll tell my wife, like, okay, this guy's the shapeshifter, and he's about to betray this person. And she's like, no, it's impossible. And I said, well, yeah, no, it's going to happen right now, and this is the guy that's going to be the guy that's the shapeshifter. And it just drives her absolutely nuts. It
drives my family crazy to the point where they don't believe me that I haven't seen it before. And I honestly haven't seen it before. And there have been a couple movies that have surprised me. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but there have been a couple that I didn't see coming. But majority of the time, I can figure out what's going to happen. So there you go. Don't go watch a movie with Victoria Robinson.
I will never watch a movie with you unless you're screening one of my movies to promote it. Then I'll watch a movie with you, but you have to shush.
Okay.
I have an obnoxious skill that you're not even going to believe. You're going to think I'm making this up. I have something called face blindness, which is I do not recognize people from their face. It's very embarrassing at times, and then I have to confess to people that I have this. It's Google it. It's real. But that doesn't mean I don't.
Blinding? Is that the same thing as when? Because I can remember a face, but not a name.
No, this is a real thing. Like you don't recognize people. There's a triangle from above your eyes down to your mouth that the brain processes facial recognition, and my brain doesn't do that. My brain doesn't do a lot of things it's supposed to do. That's one of them, and it's very obnoxious. But it doesn't mean you don't recognize people. You recognize people all sorts of different ways. There are a lot of people with face blindness that don't even know it because they think they recognize people, and it's usually in an awkward situation. Like for me, my personal assistant tapped me on the shoulder like 15 years ago at a grocery store and was right behind me with her hair pulled back in a hat, and I did not know who she was. Went to the doctor, thought I had dementia or something. So, but I can recognize people by the way they move,
their
head.
Well, if I see you at a conference, though, at an event, and you walk past me and don't even say hello, you're not being rude. You're just being face blind.
I'll usually recognize you because how you hold your head. People have a lot of ways to recognize them. But if you were to like be right behind me in a grocery store with a hat on or something and your hair different, for sure, I would not for sure recognize you. And I'm sure it addles me that I hurt people's feelings. But I discovered a superpower that I have because of face blindness. I watch The Masked Singer with my family. And guess what?
You knew everybody.
I know who they are the moment they walk on stage. If I know who they are. Some of them I don't know who they are. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And
oh, gosh. I watched that the first season. I haven't watched it since, but I'm really glad. I hope there's more people that have what you have, because with all this COVID stuff going on,
right?
When I've gone to the grocery store and I have a hat on and sunglasses and a mask, my thought has been, I haven't washed my hair in 3 days. I've got on sweatpants and a sweatshirt. Gosh, I hope nobody knows who I am.
More people have face blindness than COVID, Victoria. People are probably wondering, what in the world are we talking about? We're not here to talk about movies or your bad habits or my disabilities. We're here to talk about your friend sent me an article of yours, The Other Unsung Heroes. And you're somebody I've known about for years. People have raved about your commitment to women and children in crisis and young mothers and young families. So I knew who you were. I knew about all of your work with pregnancy centers for over 2 decades. And we just recently met, but your friend sent me this article, and it was my number one thought when the lockdown happened. Not just my nonprofit, because I have a global donor database, and we have a small overhead. My first thought was, I'm on the board of a pregnancy center, and I'm like, we're done. We're doomed. We're done. Because we help the most vulnerable women in our communities. We have a very small group of donors and a working class community that supports our center. And now we're going to be overwhelmed with the need. We're doomed. And then I realized many of these over 2,000 centers that serve vulnerable young mothers and their children are in the same predicament we are in. And then you wrote this article, The Other Unsung Heroes, about these people, these women and men, these volunteers and these donors that support these centers that serve the most vulnerable members of our community, these young women in a crisis pregnancy. I know a lot of people don't like to use that word, but as somebody who was at 17 in one, it felt like a crisis at the time to me. you said, hey, these people are sensitive. We need to save these pregnancy centers. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I mean, they are. And that's funny that the first thought you had was, oh my gosh, we're in trouble. The first thought I had was, this is a great opportunity, because I knew there would be women who were finding themselves pregnant during this pandemic. And the first thought, what they're going to have is go to an abortion clinic. Are the abortion clinics open? I've got to have an abortion, because we have this doomsday, end of the world mentality. So many people do. And they're losing jobs. They don't know if they're going to have one to go back to. People don't have the money to buy groceries. Talk about being in the most vulnerable time of your life if you find out you're pregnant without any support. It's right now during a pandemic. So my first initial thought was, abortion clinics are going to do whatever they can to stay open and deem themselves essential, which they have done, and they're still continuing to fight. And I said to someone in a video that I did that it blows my mind there are doctors, nurses, EMTs, firemen, policemen risking their lives, Jason, to save lives right now during this pandemic. Well, as they always do, but right now more than ever, when there are abortion doctors, abortion nurses who are fighting to end lives. That is just mind-boggling to me. So I think the pregnancy resource centers are more critical than ever right now.
Yeah, no, and we both had the same thought in a different direction. You were like, we're going to have more and more clients than ever. And I was like, how are we going to keep the doors open to serve these clients now? And you're right. So these pregnancy centers, and I'm finding this with our own center, and I've been hearing it from a lot of my friends across the country, they're being inundated with clients. And
oh yeah, they are. Yeah,
they're being inundated with clients. Before we even get to your article on because I want to know, why is this so important to you? Why? Because you know what, pregnancy center, maybe in our lifetime, but not anytime soon, are people going to be standing outside applauding for pregnancy center workers and volunteers who leave for work, right? Like we see happening to other medical professionals. And so it's not something you're going to get a ribbon or an award or a pat on the back. Why is this so important to you to support these centers that help vulnerable women?
Well, thanks for asking. I've been involved in the work over 2 decades, as you said, and the reason that I found myself in the pro-life movement was because I am a woman who had an abortion over 30 years ago, and I was lied to the same exact way women are lied to today, that are manipulated at their most vulnerable time in their life, Jason. They are lied to and manipulated by a multi-billion-dollar industry whose bottom line is money. It isn't women's choice. It isn't women's health care. That's all just crap. It is nothing to do with anything more than money. And I will never forget when the woman on the phone who initially I spoke with, who secured my appointment, said to me on the phone as I was struggling with the decision that I'd be very selfish as a single mother who could barely take care of the 2 children I had to bring another child into the world, and that I was so early in my pregnancy, it's not really anything there but a blob of tissue. It's like removing a tumor, pulling a tooth. Let's get you in here right away. That was a Wednesday. On a Saturday morning when I went for my appointment, on the way there, I held my hand to my stomach, begging this blob of tissue, clump of cells that wasn't anything for forgiveness for what I was about to do, which should have been a clue. But I kept hearing that woman's voice telling me I was being selfish. I wasn't a good mother. What kind of mother brings another child in the world when you can barely take care of the 2? I was a single mom and I was struggling. But after I got there and I handed her, the same woman, my cash, $350, she was so kind to me, holding my hand as I cried, asking her if this was the right thing. I still wasn't sure. I knew the outcome of a pregnancy was a child. I already had 2 children. And she just kept reiterating what she had said on the phone, how selfish it would be. You're young. You can have children later. This isn't really a baby. There's nothing there. It's not going to take long. When you leave here, never think of this again. As soon as I handed her my money, her entire demeanor changed. And once she had it in her hand, she looked at me and said, if you change your mind when you're on that table, you don't get your money back because we don't give refunds here. And
it reminds me of that scene. It reminds me of that scene from Glenn Ross, like ABC, always be closing. That woman was just closing a deal. She had to say to you what she
Yep.
needed. And once she got the money, the deal was closed. You're not getting the money back. She didn't care.
The deal was closed, and the rest of the experience was horrific. When I got on the elevator afterwards, I knew that my life was never going to be the same. I knew I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. I knew I'd been lied to and manipulated, but I buried it for 13 years until I walked in to a pregnancy resource center. For 13 years, I got involved in abusive relationships. I thought that I deserved to be hit by a man, to be called names by a man, to be cheated on by a man, because who was I to expect any kind of happiness or gentleness from someone when I had taken the life of my own child? So after 13 years, I met the director of the pregnancy center in the town where I live. She was actually coming to the church I started attending, and she invited me to come for 3 years. And finally, after 3 years, I said, God, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of feeling this way. I'm tired of always feeling like you hate me and you're never going to forgive me. And I saw Mary's face in my mind. The woman's name was Mary, Mary Hellenberger. And I felt the Holy Spirit say to my heart, I've been trying. And the next day I called her and I said, I'm ready to come volunteer. I went, I talked to her. She got me in post-abortion counseling. Long story short, I went through the post-abortion counseling, it changed my life, and I was determined and committed to the cause ever since.
You know, hearing your story, for me, it's personally heartbreaking. I don't know if you know that I was involved in an abortion when I was 17. My girlfriend got pregnant.
I do. I heard a little bit about your story.
Yeah, we both wanted the baby, so I joined the Army on my 17th birthday. In the third trimester, her father found out she was pregnant, beat her up, and took her to Chicago Masonic Hospital where she had a forced third trimester abortion. And I erupted. I was an atheist in the pro-life movement, but I was very aggressive, became very violent, always in fights, very angry at the world. And Vicki Thorne, the founder of Project Rachel, said to me, Jason, do you know how hard you've been working for all these years and how hard and angry and aggressive you were in those early years? She said, when men are involved in an abortion, they explode. Women implode. All that anger and violence that you sent out into the world, imagine turning that in on yourself. And I just started crying because I know how I didn't want to become a Christian when I assented to the truth of Christianity, because I didn't want to stop being angry. And I thought if I become a Christian...
I'm really glad you brought up...
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
No,
you go ahead.
I just knew, I'm like, I know if I become a Christian, I'll be like these Christians and I won't be angry anymore. And if I'm not angry, I won't work hard anymore. And it's my anger that drives me.
I'm so glad you brought up the issue of men, because after I went through post-abortion counseling, which is very important to say, after I went through my own counseling and healing, and I knew that God had redeemed me, I decided to write a book called They Lied to Us. It's in its fourth print now, and I'm getting ready to re-release it. And when the book was published, I felt this need to call the father of my aborted child, my boyfriend, who I was madly in love with, who he had said when I told him we were pregnant, you probably should go ahead and go through with the abortion. I think it's best. We'll have kids later when we get married. Well, we didn't get married. We broke up. 9 out of 10 times when an abortion occurs, couples don't make it. It's too traumatic of an experience and a reminder of what you did. So we went our separate ways. That's what kills me when I hear about these young women who are having abortions to keep their husbands or their boyfriends, when they don't realize you're going to lose them anyway. And then you're going to have to deal with this abortion on top of it. Well, after the book was coming out, we still had a lot of the same friends, but thank God we never ran into each other in all that time, because I wasn't ready. The Lord knew I wasn't ready, but I did. But we just didn't. And I always thought, he's gone on with his life. I'm hearing he's doing well, and it would make me angry. But after post-abortion healing, I thought I had released him, completely forgiven him. I decided I should call him to tell him about the book. Even though I changed his name and no one would know it was him unless they were close to us, I just felt this need to tell him. When I called him, Jason, on the phone, he heard my voice and started to sob. And he was saying something, but I couldn't understand him. So when he finally calmed down, He said, I've been waiting for this call for over a decade to beg you for forgiveness for what I made you do. And I would give anything to go back because my job was to protect you and our child, and I let you both down. It has haunted me all these years, and I've been in therapy for 8 years dealing with it. Will you forgive me?
Well, how beautiful.
And it was beautiful. And in that moment, I told him, I forgive you. It really, and that was when my complete forgiveness happened. At that moment, I knew I hadn't released it all my unforgiveness for him. And I did in that moment. But the second thing that happened, which changed my career path, which was not just going to be pro-life movement for men, for women and children, but it changed it for men. Because God spoke to my heart and said, I want you to work to make sure men are not forgotten. These children have fathers too, and they are forgotten in this issue, and they have just as many rights to that child as the mother. And that's why I have been adamant about men and talking about men. So from that moment on, I've always spoken anywhere I've ever spoken, whether it's a church, a pregnancy, a resource center banquet, wherever it is, I always talk about men. And they come up to me at the book table and say, thank you for not forgetting about us, because we're hurting too, but we're not allowed to tell anyone.
No.
So that's one of the things that I have been adamant about. And last summer, I produced videos that I'll have to send you, Jason, being a filmmaker guy. I directed and produced these videos with men who'd experienced an abortion. And every one of them but one, I was the first person they were telling on camera that they'd gone through this experience. And all of these men used the word haunted, but yet none of them even met each other. I specifically scheduled them on purpose to not run into each other because they didn't know each other. But they all used the same word that the father of my aborted child used, which was haunted. So we cannot forget that men are hurting in this issue as well.
Well, and notice you called him and immediately he knew what the call was. And
He immediately knew, yeah.
And it's right under the surface. In 2000, I was invited to the Christian Coalition dinner, and I was sat at in D.C., and I was sat at the head table with Pat Robertson. There was like 20 people at this big table in a banquet room in D.C. Sitting next to me was a Navy SEAL in his dress blues, and I had Precious Feet on, and he asked me what they were, and I said, with no fear or no thought that this would lead to an argument, I said, oh, they're called Precious Feet, and these are the size of a baby's feet 10 weeks after conception. It's the symbol of the pro-life movement. It's a good conversation starter. Normally when people ask me what that is, I say I'm the founder of the International Foot Fetish Alliance. I look at their feet and smile. And then and they go, really? I go, no. And then I tell them, but I set it up with a joke. But with this guy, I thought, I'm at the head table of the Christian Coalition banquet. There's Pat Robertson, and here are all these pro-life leaders. I don't have to do any little wordplay here. I'm just going to tell him what it is. So he said, well, I'm pro-choice. And he was really aggressive about it. And I said, well, being an Army guy, playing on his pride, I said, well, of course you are. You're in the Navy. You're effeminate and lack all manly virtue. And I'm an Army guy. Like, it's natural for us to protect women and children from violence. And he said, well, I guess you're against contraception and what did he say? Oh, vasectomies too. He said, yeah, I got a vasectomy. And I said, oh, so you're cheating on your wife, huh? And then that led to an interesting conversation where he admitted to having an abortion when he was 17, being involved in an abortion. I said, well, you forgot about that girl and you left her in the dust. She's been addled by that abortion ever since. You've never thought about her one day since. And he said, well, that's not true. I married her. She's my wife. And I said, brother, your wife is, I might have used the word haunted. I said, your wife has been living. I go, have you ever talked about it? Not once, not since we left the abortion clinic. And this guy at the time was in his late 30s. This happened when they were 17. I said, brother, she's thought about this abortion every day since. And this man, he just looked like he turned into a ghost. He ended up coming with me to my hotel room. He said, I want to call my wife. So that she was in San Diego. We were in D.C. We got to our room. It was about 3 a.m. our time because we were just talking and talking. He said, I need to call my wife now. Will you pray for me? So he's got it on speakerphone. He calls his wife. I have my hand on his shoulder, and I don't think it was speakerphone. I just think I could hear her. He called, and as I'm just silently praying, he says, I've called to ask your forgiveness. And he didn't say for what. And she began immediately crying. Immediately. And he said, I didn't say what I'm asking for forgiveness for yet. And she said, I know. And he said, I'm talking about the abortion when we were 17. And she just began to really cry. And she said, I know. And how would she know, right? That's 17 years later, but she knew more than that. What is that? But she knew. But it's very hard for men. Men are told they don't have a right to say anything, and women are told anyone would be a better parent than them. So the most responsible thing to do is have an abortion.
Oh my gosh, Jason, that's so powerful, and it's just so telling of everything I'm talking about that you're talking about with men and with women and how they're affected by abortion. And when people say to me, whether it's negative or positive, about, well, you just care about these babies, well, you just want to, so you can say, oh, another baby was saved. And I tell them, praise God for the babies that are saved for abortion through the Pregnancy Resource Center work, through when I share my testimony. But for me, it's not been just about the babies since that phone call with my ex. It's been about men and women as well, because when a baby's aborted, God forbid, they're with God immediately, of course. God forbid when they're aborted, they're gone. But the men and women are left here behind to deal with their decision. And I say this all the time, Jason, but Christ died on the cross for those parents just as much as he did for these unborn children. We cannot forget about these hurting moms and dads out there. So what a powerful, powerful story. I loved it. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, and just like you were told that baby would be better off born to anyone but you, you were not worthy of being a mother. That's why you chose abortion, because of your desire to be a good mother. He was told to be a good partner and a good man. He had no right to say anything to you, and probably also was insecure and thought he would be a horrible father. In my case, I couldn't forgive my high school girlfriend's father for the longest time. Then when he repented to me, finally, I could forgive him. And then it was like through grace, I realized what he did. People might get mad at me for saying this, but he did it because he was trying to be a good father. And I was last in my class in high school from a broken, poor family. He was from a prominent Chicago family. And the idea, if my daughter brought a young man around our house like me, I'd be horrified. I'd be in dread. I would drive him away with a pitchfork, right? So
yep.
He was doing what he thought was a loving thing. And that's the empathy I think that we all have to learn, is that this abortion culture is penetrated into all of our lives, into all of our families, and all of us in one way or another. It's a social sin in a way. The Supreme Court lied to you. Our political leaders lied to you and your boyfriend when you were young. Even religious leaders lied to you. That salesperson at the abortion clinic had the best, most sophisticated, tested and proven successful lines to close that deal. And there you were, just a young, vulnerable, scared person. And under the weight of the Supreme Court, the Democrat Party, the mainstream media, most of the religious denominations in America, you buckled. Well, how could you not? How could you not buckle? It's unimaginable that people don't. The young people choose life, that heroically choose life. That's the amazing thing.
But here's the problem, though, Jason. Here's what's so tragic is the collateral damage is there. It's like when I hear, well, Planned Parenthood just they care about women. No, they don't care about women. How can you tell me they care about women when I'm the one counseling these women who have just left their centers or clinics from years ago or months ago, who are damaged and tried to get help from them, and they are done with them. So the bottom line is it is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and people don't get that. There's nothing pro-woman about abortion. Not anything. And the problem we have now, and our challenge, is reaching this they say 64 million plus abortion since Roe v. Wade. I think it's a lot more, but let's just stick with 64 million. That's 125 million men and women who are out here just desperate for help. I had a woman who come up to me in Cody, Wyoming, Jason, just a few months ago. I was speaking at a banquet there. She walks up to me afterwards, and she's crying. I could tell she was emotional. She was probably 60, early 60s. And I knew what she was coming to talk to me about. It happens all the time when I'm somewhere speaking. So she said, I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. My friend, her husband couldn't come last minute, so she asked me if I wanted to come. She said, somebody's going to be speaking. It's going to be a nice dinner. Do you want to go and have a girls' night? I said, sure. I had no idea. She never told me. And she said, you just spoke about me. And I didn't know that I was allowed to grieve. It's been 40 years for me. I never thought I was allowed to cry. And every time I've wanted to cry, I haven't allowed myself because I chose to have an abortion. And the second thing she said to me was, I didn't know there was help for people like me. Because two things I spoke about in that lecture was, I will always grieve the loss of my child and and what I lost. And I will always point women and men to post-abortion counseling so they can get the help they need. She didn't know either one of those were allowed. So she cried and cried and said, thank you for giving me permission to grieve. And I looked at her and said, I'm so sorry for your loss. She said, it was losses. It was twin girls, and I've never had more children. But this woman, for 40 years, Jason, when she was getting emotional about it, buried it. Because like so many post-abortive men and women, they believe, how do I have the right to get upset about this when I walked in there and chose abortion? They don't think about the way they were manipulated and lied to what you just said by so many people. So that's why my heart is to reach as many men and women as I can with the post-abortion redemptive message, because it needs to be told.
Yeah, we meet all kinds of people, right, Victoria? There are people listening who you look at a young person and it's easy to forgive them. Lecrae, who was, after he became a Christian, was involved in abortion and wrote a song about that. There are Christian men in marriages, and they look at their children, and these are just stories that I've had that are having affairs, and they panic and pay for an abortion. We met a young woman outside of an abortion clinic who was an illegal immigrant, raped by her employer, and was Catholic and devout and pro-life, but thought that if she had the baby, she would lose her husband and her children back in Mexico. There are all these countless different circumstances where people feel lonely and abandoned and scared. But I'm grateful that I had a son at 18 and a daughter at 19. So the abortion at 17, son at 18, daughter at 19. I was just cleaning out my office because what else am I going to do in this lockdown? I can only do one podcast a day, right? But I have been working harder than ever, actually. I've been working 14-hour days. But I took a break, and I was going through these old photos, looking at me as an 18-year-old father, and I looked 12. And I'm looking through all these photos, being a dad, 18, 19, 20, seeing my children there when I got my associate's degree, and then when I got my bachelor's degree. And we're so young, and I'm so young, and having a child young was the most beautiful gift. I say I had a winning lottery ticket at 18. And this woman that you're talking about, think of the life that she lost. I mean, it's just heartbreaking. Never had kids, and she could have been this mom, even if it was hard. We were homeless for a time, when I was right out of the Army. And really hard times. They didn't seem hard at the time for me. They just seemed like what you do as you're trying to get on your feet. But they were, in retrospect, people would think it was hard. But it was beautiful. And I'm just so grateful for all of that. And my heart breaks for all of these people who've had abortions and never had children again. It's really heartbreaking.
Oh, I know. I meet them all the time, and it is hard because this woman is alone, and she got married but divorced a couple times, and she has no children, and will never have grandchildren. And her girls are gone. Her twin girls are gone, and a woman asked me as well recently. I was getting emotional. Sometimes I get very emotional when I speak. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's a little bit. It just does. I don't know. But she said afterwards, I'm worried for you, Victoria. You just seemed so hurt and so sad when you were talking about your story. Are you sure you've allowed God to completely heal you? And I said, well, do you have children? Yeah, I have 3. Well, I asked her, if you lost one, how would you feel? She said, I'd be devastated. And I go, well, the post-abortive man and woman, the mother and father, are also devastated when they realize the reality of what they have done and what's happened. They have a loss of a child. You are going to grieve that child the rest of your life. And speaking of men again, Jason, I spoke at an event for men. I think it's called Cayman Ministry, Men's Ministry, back in Orlando last summer. And they never let women speak at these events. It's mostly all men. They rarely, if ever, have a woman speak. Well, I went to speak. I was invited to speak at a luncheon there. And there were men standing outside, waiting up to 2 hours in line in Orlando heat in the summer to talk to me. And you know what they wanted to tell me? They'd had abortions in their past, and some had never told their wives. They had never dealt with it. Now they were realizing why they treated their wife the way they did, their children the way they do. Some said they were struggling with porn addiction, alcoholism, drug addiction, and now they're asking themselves, does it have something to do with I've never dealt with this? And so these are the kinds of things and this was just last summer. So that's why I'm saying, Jason, we're in 2020 now. You need to be making a movie about post-abortive men and women. That needs
We
to be
did. We made a movie called Voiceless.
Yes, that's correct.
So, but
right.
when I founded Movie to Movement, people said, how many movies can you make on abortion? Well, we've about one a year since 2006. You're
right. And that's an incredible movie. Everyone needs to watch that.
And what I loved about Voiceless was how it allows the male character to act like a man would really act. Not the sort of Christian homogenized man, but it's how a man really reacts. And so Voiceless is something everyone should see. Maybe I'll do a DVD giveaway. And it's not just here in the States. I had interns from China several years back, and it was interesting. Their university only approved women students. So I had this huge group of women students in LA. And I told them the first day the interns came, I made them watch a video on the Tiananmen Square Massacre and Braveheart. And we talked about freedom and the Cultural Revolution, how devastating it was to China and the one-child policy. And I said, my one goal here is that none of you girls have abortions. So welcome to Hollywood. That was sort of my pitch. And they got to watch Braveheart with Steve McAvity, the producer. But the girls had told me just in one day when we were all talking that what they like about being in America is they can be a little more aggressive. And they said, our men are become very effeminate and weak. And we talk about it as women in China, that the one-child policy has emasculated our men because they cannot protect their wives and their daughters. And so they've just become like beaten dogs. And so we have to exaggerate our femininity as to make them feel manly. And
wow.
It was these young girls just casually kind of brought this up. Like, here we can be a little more tomboyish and outspoken because we don't have to feign this exaggerated femininity. And they were all, we talk about how this is how the one-child policy, or now the two-child policy, then it was still the one-child policy, has impacted men. So you think of a country where almost every woman and man is post-abortive. That's China.
Oh, yeah, you're right. And, unfortunately, I'm seeing the same thing happening here as far as emasculating men in this country. Jason, it's happening it's rampant to me. And it's very unfortunate what it's doing to the breakup of the family and our country as a whole. I don't know how people can't see it. I just don't understand how they don't see it. And I'll tell you, there's a lot of men hurting and a lot of women hurting too. But when my boyfriend, he was my boyfriend, he was not my husband, but when that ex-boyfriend told me on the phone what he said to me, it really completed my healing. For whatever reason, for me, that's one of the things that I needed to know. I had thought all these years, over a decade, that he forgot about it, never thought about it. It just didn't change how I felt towards forgiving him. It also shifted my paradigm as to how I viewed the post-abortive man. And that's why when girls say to me, well, they don't care. They just want to have sex with us, get us pregnant. And they may not care now, but trust me, they will care because you guys were made, Jason, to protect us. Like you've said a couple of times, men were born, like we are nurturers. Women are nurturers. Men are protectors, the hunter. And when that happens, that's why it affected him so much and many, many men that I've met. Because as he said to me on the phone, my job was to protect you and our child, and I failed you.
Yeah, I have to imagine every man or woman's impacted by it, unless there wasn't something so wrong with them already. You know,
True.
I can't imagine. So when people tell me they haven't been affected, I don't believe them. I mean, it just seems.
Well, when I don't either. I think they just don't know it yet. They don't realize that some of their behaviors or some of the thought processes or their destructive relationships stem from an abortion. A lot of people don't realize that. They just think, oh, it was my mom's fault, my dad's fault. I had a bad childhood, this or that, whatever. And that could be part of it. But if there's an abortion in your past, there's no question it will affect you to some degree. Maybe some more than others, I'll give you that. But there's no way you come out of an abortion unscathed. You are not the same person when you walk in as the person when you walk out.
Vicky Thorne, she was looking at my Facebook of the old pictures I had of my children from when I was 19, 20, 22, 24. She said, Jason, look at everyone. There's the same pose. You have both arms locked around them and you're looking at the camera like, do you want to fight? Like you're in this protective posture. And my children will tell you, my daughter always says to people, you don't understand. I don't remember how many fist fights I saw my dad in. You know, living in Hawaii and Waikiki, walking around as a single dad, if somebody said a cross word to my child or looked at them the wrong way, I would say, what are you looking at? Look at my kid like that again. Look at my kid like that again and see what happens. Anybody. If they looked at my kid wrong, talked to my kid wrong, I was over the top. And then, you know, I grew up, learned how to manage this post-abortion rage that I was dealing with, this fear of my children being hurt that I was constantly wrestling with and addled by. But it wasn't until Vicky Thorne, well after I'd gotten a grip on that, was looking at these pictures. And then I thought to what my daughter said once at a dinner party to some friends, like, no, I don't remember how many fights I saw my dad in when I was a kid. He was always scrapping with people. And Vicky Thorne helped me understand that it was, and I can tell you, I mean, I wrote a book, The Race to Save Our Century. I started writing as an undergrad on genocide, democide, and total war. And I wrote that book because I was overwhelmed with the fear that one day my children would be stuck in a tyrannical dystopian society where we were locked in our house. Could you imagine that fear I had? And so bizarre that I had that fear, but I really did. I had a fear that my kids would be in a concentration camp or in a war, and my son fought in Syria and Iraq. And it was the last thing I wanted. So that was one of the reasons I founded my organization, to try to work to create a culture of life, love, and beauty. I used to tell my kids, I'm sorry your dad has to do all this work. If I could save you without saving the world, I would do it. But unfortunately, I don't think I can protect my children from drowning unless I stop the ship from sinking. And and I think it was being addled by this abortion at 17 that just hyper-focused me, first in a very dysfunctional way on protecting my children, and then I learned to order it into a more productive way. And maybe that's what we need to do, Victoria, is there's so many of us out there that were wounded by this. There's a great book, you might have read it, called Anti-Fragile, by the economist Nicholas Nassim, I get his names all mixed up. But it's a great book, and he talks about something, there's post-traumatic stress disorder. But did you know there's another phenomena called post-traumatic growth, where people involved in a horrible trauma, their IQ leaps, their character changes completely to the better. And I think that that's our goal with the trauma of any trauma. It's to take that stumbling block and turn it into a stepping stone. The one gift of deep sorrow is empathy. And every post-abortive person is an empathetic person. They have the ability to be a very empathetic person if they're just thoughtful to how much they've been suffering. Within every second since the abortion, there's sorrow. And
absolutely, yeah, that's true. And I really wholeheartedly believe Of course, because it's not just because it's the word of God. I've seen it play out in my own life. That what the enemy meant for evil to destroy me, he has turned into good. And that's the other message that the post-abortive man and woman need to understand, is that there is nothing that you've ever done, including abortion, that he cannot redeem, and that he cannot heal, and that he cannot fill that void. I see a lot of women when they're coming to me for counseling that tell me, I've been on taking antidepressants, I've tried alcohol, I've tried promiscuity, I've tried all these things, I'm seeing a psychiatrist, nothing is helping me. And I explain to them that the reason I believe, in my opinion, of why these drugs and even antidepressants, and I'm not telling anyone to go off antidepressants, but I'm saying the reason I believe they still have that hole is because our child was a spirit, and only a God that is a spirit can fill that. It can heal that. And that's why I think it's so important that post-abortive men and women understand. You don't even look, people have come through retreats that I do that aren't Christian. Now, it's biblically based. I do these 4-day retreats for women, and I have men who do it for men. And it's an intensive 4-day post-abortion retreat. It's the same thing I went through that I got my healing from. And I let them know, here, I'm telling you up front, a lot of this is Bible-based, but you don't have to be a Christian to come. And you know what many of them say to me, Jason? I don't care what you use. I am sick and tired of feeling this emptiness and this pain. So I've tried everything else. I'm willing to give this a try. That's how desperate people are for help.
And it's important they know they're not alone. We're most people. I think we're most people. You know, I get upset when I hear pastors tell these stories. Oh, I was the world's worst sinner. And I always say, oh, you murdered people, you raped people. Oh, no. I'm like, you mean you smoked pot, had sex with girls involved in an abortion?
Right.
Oh, get in line.
I dishonored my parents.
Yeah, that's a big line. If you were born after 1949, that line is big. That's a big room. That's everybody. Really, in my generation, you know, we live in the same culture. We've done the same things. So when you're addled by these things, but we do, right? We do something everyone else has done, and we think we're the worst person in the world. No, not at all. Of course you did.
No.
We've been lied to the same lies, bearing the same burdens.
Yep. And, you know, when I do these retreats, Jason, my requirement is always that one of the facilitators has to be post-abortive, and one of the facilitators doesn't have to be post-abortive. And I want someone there that's facilitating, that's part of the team that hasn't had an abortion. And here's why. Because these women and these men are looking at two men or two women, depending on if it's a men or women's retreat, and they're seeing this person who's had an abortion like them, and they automatically, as you said, feel like, oh gosh, I'm not alone. She knows. She gets it. Victoria's had an abortion. She knows what I'm talking about. Then they look at this other person who's not post-abortive, who's loving them, who's spending their time that whole weekend with them, who's pouring into them, showing them nothing but love and compassion. And they're thinking, wow, I thought people like her would reject me, would judge and condemn me. She genuinely cares about me. So I want them to see Christ through someone who's had an abortion, someone who hasn't. Because they're walking around for decades, like this woman for 44 decades, thinking, oh gosh, if she knew, she probably wouldn't be my friend. If he knew, he would divorce me. And they're believing these lies, so they bury it. So I want them to see firsthand, no, you know what? She has never even had an abortion, but she genuinely loves her. And it has worked. All these years that I've been doing this retreat, it has worked so well because the women, I listen to what they say, and what they have said so many times is it meant so much to me that you, Susie Q, haven't even had an abortion, but I have felt nothing but love from you for the past 4 days.
I think
that's huge.
I think that's beautiful, Victoria. How do we get? I am a big fan of Project Rachel, and I'll put that in the show notes. How do people get in touch with you who are post-abortive or looking to take a retreat to get access to resources?
You can email me.
Okay.
You can email me at and then my name, R, initial R, Victoria Robinson at gmail.com.
I'm going to put
And
that.
if you're a man or a woman, I can connect you with either retreats that I'm doing or that I have facilitators doing for women. And then I have men who are facilitating retreats for men. And you know who Michael W. Smith and Debbie are, right?
Oh, of course. Yes.
They have a beautiful farmhouse here in Nashville, and they have extended so graciously and generously. They allow me to use that for these retreats.
Well, I want, to those of you who are post-abortive listening, I'm going to put all this in the show notes. I want you to journal before you go on a retreat how you feel, because the great gift of a tragedy is empathy. And you need to feel it. You need to remember it, because later there's going to be somebody who the only person in the world that can understand and talk to them is you. Did you lose a child to leukemia or to a drunk driving accident? Did you go through a horrible divorce? All of these things, the pain that you're feeling, I always journal, because sometimes when we're healed, we forget, and you go back and you read and you remember. And it's just so important, the gift of empathy. So before the retreat, after the retreat. Before the retreat, I say journal. After the retreat, journal. But you have to do this. If it's like putting the mask in, for me, the only way I can be motivated to do something, Victoria, I think a lot of people are like this. We're like, I'm fine. So I can be more useful in helping other people. So I knew that I had to put the mask on myself. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, Jason. It's about others. It's about your family, how you're going to now parent, how you're going to, the kind of mom or dad. You want to be a whole mom or dad. And if you're walking around with this big hole of abortion, you're not walking in the fullness that I believe God wants for you and the full happiness. I've been single a long time, Jason, and I have, in the past, before healing, I would have just, well, who cares? Yeah, he's this way, he's that way. So what? I have come to such a place of healing with Christ through the work, and it's taken work. And listen, I have not arrived. If anybody ever tells me they've arrived, including myself, let's pray that lion demon out of us right now. We will never arrive till he takes us home. But I can tell you that past girl who thought she wasn't worthy to be with a man who could love her as Christ loves the church is gone. She's gone. And so I won't settle for anything but God's best for me, because guess what? I'm a daughter of the King and I deserve it.
And you knew how much you were hurting. And that's why you wrote this article. That's why you're out there so energetically and joyfully. I mean, everyone that has ever talked to me about you mention your name, they get a smile. Now, you bring me up, it's probably 20% of the time you get that response. But
that's fine. I don't think so, Jason.
Hey, maybe 30% of the time. So, Victoria, I thank you so much for taking time out of drinking coffee, wine, and watching Netflix or whatever you're doing. I don't know what we're all doing, but in between putting on a mask and going to the grocery store.
I'm definitely not working out. So I'll be joining the gym first day we're out of this quarantine.
Can you keep a secret?
Yeah, I'll try.
I'm going to a clandestine Muay Thai kickboxing training session today with some friends. We're sneaking up to clandestinely train.
My hat's off to you, buddy. You know what? I'll be lucky if I take a 3-mile walk in my neighborhood, but that's my goal.
You've got to do it. My family's been doing walks every day, and it's the best. And to keep my sanity, people have to punch me in the face or I lose my mind. So I'm sneaking off to somewhere, an undisclosed location to box.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure and a joy, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. And anything I can do for you anytime, you've got my number.
All right, and I want you to know I am immediately going to begin spreading the rumor that you give away the endings to movies. Never watch a movie with that woman. She's horrible. I've got my mission, and I'm off to the races.
If that's the worst rumor spread about me, I'm okay with that.
All right, Victoria Robinson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, everybody, this day of all days, you are going to go into the show notes, especially if you're post-abortive, and you're going to look at the resources we have. Victoria gave you her email. If you don't want to go to some organization or some group, you want to talk to her personally, I implore you, please send that email so you can put the mask on for yourself, so you can put the mask on for others. If my life didn't impact others, I would be living above a bar in Costa Rica, period. It calls me every day. But I realized, no, I need to stay here, keep the oxygen mask on so I can put the oxygen mask on others. Although masks probably not a good thing to bring up now because we all hate masks. Until tomorrow, this has been the Jason Jones Show, brought to you by Movie to Movement, promoting a culture of life, love, and beauty through the power of film. Go to movieToMovement.com now and sign our pledge to tithe during this shutdown to your local CPC. Aloha.
This has been The Jason Jones Show, powered by Mudhouse Media.